Hello and welcome to the Bestseller Experiment, where we continue to discover, after 6 years still,
6 years, man,
to discover what makes a bestseller and inspire you to start, finish, and publish your book. I'm Mark DeVoe.
And I'm Mark Stay. Look, I can make things go big and go small. This is on the YouTube. If you're listening on audio, this is going to sound weird. But yes, we're on StreamYard. We're live on the YouTubes. And yes, a huge thank you, especially now, after 6 years, to everyone who has kept this podcast going. Anyone who has, given us money on Patreon, has been on the Academy, has stopped us in the street and given us a kiss on both cheeks. That hasn't happened yet. Anyone who has spread the word, told their friends about it. We're here still after 6 years, astonishingly, and we thank you for it. So thank you.
Absolutely. And this episode, everyone who's listening to this episode is currently being recorded live on YouTube. So if you are part of we'd like to firstly welcome all the people from around the world who have joined us in our studio audience from all different corners of the world. And we'd like you to tell us whereabouts you're from and also when you started listening to the podcast. We're going to be asking for your questions because this show today is about showing you some of the background as to how this podcast is actually made, because a lot of people are fascinated by podcasts. Many people are thinking of starting their own podcast. And 6 years ago, Mark and I decided we'd do this. It was just the two of us back then, Mark, wasn't it? Do you remember?
Yeah. And it had that sort of youthful naivety of how hard could it possibly be? We had a big advantage, which I was working for a publisher in the middle of London, and every single day, authors were walking through the door, and not just, author. Some big name authors and some people who had incredible stories to tell. And also I'm surrounded by people in the industry who could give us advice on how, how books are written, how publishing works, what makes a bestseller and all that good stuff. So we were kind of in the right place at the right time. To start with, I had lots of late nights at work at Orion because you say, okay, well, can we speak to so-and-so? And I had to do it after work, but that was okay for you because it was breakfast time in Canada. So lots of getting home late, but that was okay. I was young.
Back then you had the energy, didn't you? You had that long commute home.
Yeah.
But it was quite amazing because when I remember, for people who haven't heard the story of how the podcast got started, it was really a discussion that Mark and I had when Mark got a movie deal. And Mark and I used to not go to the same school, but we'd just go to rival schools. So we used to go, I think we were about 2 miles apart, weren't there's two schools. And there were all these rumours through the years gone by that the two schools used to get together once a year and have fights. So it's like, there's this massive rivalry. It was like, Liverpool, Everton, Chelsea, Tottenham. So we then kind of talked to each other kind of later on in life once we kind of settled down, and I'd moved to Canada actually already at that point. And we got talking and anyway, eventually decided that we wanted to start this podcast, but we didn't actually know at the time what we were going to do. We didn't even know that we were going to do this idea of writing a book. And so we bounced ideas off initially. And I remember the one thing that always sticks in my head is we decided that we were going to create a spreadsheet of all of our interests, and we wanted to look for common interests. Can you remember what was on that spreadsheet? We had like favorite movies, favorite books, favorite
authors,
hobbies,
favorite bands, hobbies, all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
And we scanned through that, didn't we? And we kind of looked at, there was various things that came up that we realized that we had very similar interests in. And of course, you were working in publishing at the time, and I had been desperately wanting to write a book for my entire life, like since I was about 5, and had never finished a book. I'd been that classic, like 99% of all authors out there, they'd started like 50 books and never finished one, or I'd got to 20,000 words and never finished it. And it was this idea that popped up of, what if we try and write a book together and you kind of teach me how it works? But then you revealed to me, well, I've only ever written one book.
Only.
Right? But your background had been in screenwriting. So you'd actually been, how many years had you been writing scripts prior to actually writing Robot Overlords?
Crikey. I guess, I'd been writing seriously, I guess, since 99, because that's when my daughter was born. It all sorts of goes back there. I'd written a bunch of plays. The first play we did Claire's character was pregnant because Emily was in her belly. It was a play called Unusually Tall Boy, and it was about a couple, and one of the wife was pregnant. And so when one of the reasons we could do it, because we knew Claire's pregnancy was going to coincide with the play being on. So I wrote it into the play, and she'd get people in the bar going, "Where did you get that pregnancy bump from? Is that from a prop store?"
It's one way of saving on props.
Yeah. It's a baby. When we did the play again about 6 months later, she had to stuff something under a shirt. But yeah, so the serious writing was about 99, and then I did a couple of plays after that, and one of those I turned into a screenplay. So about 2001, 2002, seriously kind of, I'm going to make this happen. Giving up on the acting and focusing on the writing. So it's my big stroke of luck was meeting John Wright, who directed Robots and has directed Unwelcome. This is my piece of advice to people who want to be screenwriters: become best mates with a film director. I know that sounds flippant, but it's worked for me. And the industry still prioritizes directors over writers. If a director's interested, they're interested, because there's this cult of the auteur, the director. So, rightly or wrongly, and it's wrongly. It's that's how. We're getting some lovely notes from people who've been here. So GB Ralph Gavin, he's been listening since the Ben Aronovich bollocking, and he's here. Gavin is listening from New Zealand, so thanks for that, Gavin. It's probably quite.
It's silly o'clock in the morning.
Yeah,
it really
it's about 5 a.m. Yeah. Susie Edge is here, who we had on is on one of our current deep dives. Whose book Mortal is it? What's it called, Susie? Mortal Monarchs. It had to reprint because it's such a massive bestseller. It's done absolutely brilliant. Mark Hood's here, Mr. Hood, who does his word count, and his books are amazing. Ian Sainsbury's here. That's fantastic. And Sage is here. Sage says she's just had a look. My first email to you lot was in 2018, so I imagine that means I started listening in 2017 because I'm a shy and retiring sort. Inkborn Blade says, found you guys in early 2018, been listening to you on my commute ever since. Robin Sarti said, I started listening after Grant Faulkner, who's NaNoWriMo. Yeah, tweeted about it. Mark Hood found us around about the time of Bryan Cranston. Steve Gowland started after Sarah Pimborough tweeted about you, followed her after the Dublin Ghost Festival. And Ian Sainsbury says, I started once I heard the chaps talk to Joanna Penn. So that was something we did a lot in the first year, was go on other people's podcasts. That was quite a good move, I think, in the end, wasn't it?
Yeah. Now, one of the reasons we wanted to talk about this today is we know that a lot of people are interested in podcasts. So if you're in the live audience and you've got any questions you want to ask us, anything you've ever wanted to know about how the podcast is made, the processes behind how we get guests on the show. So if there's anything that's really fascinated you that you've never heard us talk about, you want us to share, it's a big reveal. It's Ask Us Anything. So pop your questions in and we'll be looking at the chat as we go. But one of the interesting things that happened in our podcast, which I think was very unusual but very lucky, is very, very early on in, I think, the first 10 episodes, we got to interview Bryan Cranston. Now, not everyone gets Bryan Cranston like within the first 6 episodes, but it was not so much obviously getting one of our heroes on the show, but it was also what then happened as a result of Bryan coming on the show. And if anyone hasn't listened to that episode, I beg you to go back. I think it's episode 6 or 7, because that was the episode that made the bestseller experiment go viral worldwide without us even realizing at the time when we were doing the interview what actually happened. Because for those, again, who are new to this podcast, Bryan, it was around the time when Trump was, it was about 2 weeks, I think, 2 or 3 weeks before the general election in the US. And this was going back, to what year was it, Mark? 2016, wasn't it?
Let's have a look.
Right?
Let's go back.
So it was just before the election when Trump got elected, and Bryan Cranston was very outspoken about Donald Trump. And I asked him, literally as a throwaway question, Bryan, what would you do if Trump got elected? And he responded, well, I said to him, would you like to come for a holiday in Vancouver Island? And he said, holiday, I'd expatriate, I'd move. And it was literally a throwaway line that he said. He joked a bit about it. We weren't sure whether he was serious or not. But the day the day that episode came out,
Halloween 2016. Halloween 2016.
I could not believe it, because what basically happened was the Globe and Mail, which is like the the biggest national newspaper in Canada, ran a page 2 article about how Bryan Cranston would leave America. Now, for everyone who goes back to that era, you might remember then a ton of other celebrities. I mean, off the top of my head, Barbara Streisand and a ton of other celebrities all came out and said, yeah, we'd leave as well. And it became this massive story that just kept rolling. And our episode on that interview with Bryan Cranston was played on Fox News in the US during primetime news. It was played on BBC Radio 4, I think, on some news article.
Yeah, Radio 4.
It was on almost every single national and provincial and regional newspaper in the world, from Washington Post to New York Times to Time magazine. And it always referenced this interview with Bryan Cranston. So one of the things that we were fortunate about is, I mean, you can't plan that kind of stuff. It just happened. But it really put the podcast on the map very early on. So a lot of people who are starting podcasts, one of the biggest challenges is it's just building the audience. It takes time, like even launching a website. It takes time to build. But we had this insane, but I remember specifically, Mark and I, do you remember we got on the phone or on Skype when it was all kicking off. And as we were talking, I said, oh no, you never guess what? The Daily Mail have just put it on their Facebook page. Do you remember? And it was like, and it just went huge. It just one thing after another. And Mark and I were just standing there, just watching it happen.
And do you remember the website, the comments? We just got bombarded by bots.
We got
sort of
bombarded
weirdly all saying the same thing. You know, if Bryan Cranston doesn't like it, he can leave, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it was, I mean, it knocked the website over a few times, didn't it? But it was.
Well, it did. And what actually transpired a few years later, you may have heard about the whole Cambridge Analytica, Facebook. We don't know for certain, but we believe we got kind of partly like were victims of that, because we got a kind of like bots coming in, telling us all this stuff. And literally we got so many comments. There was one, I think it was on Fox on Facebook. I think there were thousands, and was it like 9,000-10,000 comments or something about the interview. So it was kind of bonkers. But anyway, just to let people know, that is not usual. That doesn't happen to most podcasts, and it kind of took us a bit by surprise, because the website went down. It melted under the pressure of people coming to our website. But it was quite a start, wasn't it?
But it's one of those things that having Bryan on the show is very handy, because when I try and book guests, it's a good name to drop. It's a very good name to drop. We've got a question here from Wendy. Who would be your ultimate podcast guest, and what are the chances of getting them? Is there anyone you want? I mean, I'd love to get Neil Gaiman on.
Yes.
Which is weird, because when I worked at Headline, I used to bump into him all the time. He used to call me fanboy. I doubt he'd even recognize me now. But, you know, that was when I sold Stardust and American Gods and collections of short stories and stuff. And I went to every single one of his events, you know, hello, Neil, it's me. And now, you know, never calls, never writes. But, you know, I would love to get Neil on, because he's one of my favorite authors, but he's so generous with when he talks about the craft and when he, you know, and he really does know his stuff, and he's one of the good guys.
Do you know, he might not write anymore, Mark, but he did tweet once, didn't he? He tweeted when we launched, the day that we launched Back to Reality, I dropped him a tweet and he retweeted it, and then we started having this discussion. And I remember, Mark, you were standing at Waterloo Station, or one of the
St Pancras,
and yes. I sent you a text saying Neil Gaiman has just retweeted our book, because what basically happened is our book on the day of release overtook, what was it Good Omens? It was Terry Pratchett, and
it was Good Omens on one side, and I think American Gods on the other, or something. Or yeah, but it was like a Gaiman Pratchett sandwich. It was wonderful. It was absolutely perfect,
insane. And so you had to record a video for his Twitter, because we had to send him videos of us. I think what happened is I said, if you retweet this, we'll faint or something like that. So he said, I've retweeted it, now I want evidence. And we both had to fake these videos of us fainting that we then sent him. It was very bizarre. So Neil Gaiman would be amazing. Of course, there are a couple of, like, everyone that asks us, and then obviously I think Stephen King would be phenomenal, because...
And I have tried.
Yeah, I have tried. Back in the early days, we reached out to J.K. Rowling as well, didn't we?
Might have dodged a bullet there.
Well, I mean, and there's so many other authors. I've actually reached out. One of my favourite authors, who I'm catching up on, actually, I'm kind of late to the game, but I've actually reached out to Ken Follett because I think he would be, and I'm loving his books. But the other thing is, we've got to interview some of our favourite authors. Linwood Barclay is Lovely actually guy. We can reveal is going to be coming back on the show for his new book. And one of the great things that we get to do behind the scenes is, I received a copy of the pre-release of his new book that's not coming out till February, and that's what I'm currently sitting on my bedside table. I'm reading his new novel, and it's kind of fun because you know that no one else really has got this book. But as part of the preparation for some of these interviews, we will actually sit and read novels so that we can kind of get a bit of in-depth experience. But it kind of varies. Sometimes we get a guest who comes on, and we have very little time to prepare.
Yeah, well, I got a lovely question from Tiny Scott here, who says, how do you approach potential guests for the show? Do you just send them a cheeky email begging for them to come on? I've always wondered. I mean, the thing is, they come to us now, which is great. And we've got a backlog that is currently running to February, late February, early March. I booked someone this morning for March. And April, actually. So
and it's growing as well, isn't it? It's now, I think 6 months is the wait list now to get on the show. Yeah. And only last year, it was only about a month or two, was it, Mark? So it's a bit weird because we're getting this really difficult situation where, I mean, it's lovely that we get approached now. We get emails every week from all the top publishing companies. Harper will drop us an email, Penguin, and they're all now promoting and pushing as part of the what PR agents do. It's brilliant, but so we do get to kind of pick and choose a bit as well.
Some have got the message. Like there's Joe, who used to be at HQ. He's now at Headline, and he knows to book months in advance. He gets in touch, really, really early. And then we get some others who go, "I've got someone who's got a book out next week," and it's like, well. Shall we circle back for the paperback? So or are they willing to? I mean, the C.L. Taylor that came out last week, that was recorded in June, I think, May or June, so I do bank them. I do sort of do them whenever we can, so they're there and they're all in an archive where, we can listen to them at any time. So, Moon Bunny Creative, that's Sage. Stephen Fry would be a dream. I'm not starting a podcast, though. Stephen Fry, I've met a couple of times as well. He did an event for me when I was events manager at Waterstones in Epsom. And this was for his book Making History, which will date it. So it's about 96, I think. And they just brought in a thing in Waterstones where staff weren't allowed to smoke in the staff rooms anymore, which for my manager at the time, who smoked like a chimney, it was, he was always out on the roof smoking. And Stephen Fry came in and he was really nervous and quite shy, very, very friendly, completely lovely. And he lit up and started smoking. We were looking at each other. Is anyone going to tell him? Is anyone going to, no, okay, we'll let him smoke. So it's only been a rule for a week. And I came upstairs and said, oh, there's a local press photographer here. And he said, oh, okay. So does he want me to peer over a pyramid of books like this? I said, how did you know? He says, everywhere I go. So what the local press asked for, everywhere I go. So I'd love to get Stephen Fry back on. Absolutely brilliant. Absolutely brilliant.
That'd be fantastic. Another author I'd love to get on is Pulitzer Prize winner Anthony, I think it's pronounced Anthony Doerr. He wrote All the Light You Cannot See, which is like one of my favorite novels of all time. There's sometimes that you read a book and there's so much depth to it. There's so much brilliance. This book was written over like 7-8 years that you think, how can you do a book and an author of that magnitude justice in like a half hour, 20-minute chat? I think that's one of the biggest challenges for us, isn't it, Mark, is that we could probably chat for hours with these authors, but it's what are the most salient points that we want to ask them? And it's often about their writing process, because a lot of other podcasts out there interview authors when their book comes out and they talk about their book and their podcasts for readers. It's about, does someone want to read this book? And really our focus has been from day one. I think this is one of the reasons why we've kept going for so long, is that we've made it our point to really dig deep into the author process, the writing habits. And that's the thing that keeps me so fascinated, because there's always something new that we learn. And it's obviously very relevant to our writer
every time
base.
Absolutely. And I think authors appreciate, because if they go on local radio, they get 5 minutes tops. with us, they can sit around and they go, oh, how long? And I sometimes go, well, half an hour, 20 minutes, half an hour. And they're like, oh, great. They enjoy it. So here's a terrifying suggestion from me and Sainsbury. How about a new experiment, a new bestseller, write and publish in 3 months? Not
like a short story.
Non-fiction this time. Can anyone suggest a subject these two could write a how-to about? There must be something.
Do you know what? And it's a really great question, Ian. There is actually a non-fiction book that I wrote about 4 years ago, and it was before we started the 200-word challenge. And Mark, you remember because you kind of edited it for me, didn't you? It's a concise book, but it's called "How to Write 50,000 Words in a Month" because it was based around NaNoWriMo, and it's like these pithy ideas that either from the actual knowledge that we picked up from all the authors or just general ideas I'd picked up over the years. And I never put it out for the reason that I tried NaNoWriMo myself and then came to this conclusion that the way to build a consistent habit was writing a small amount every day rather than going for 50,000 words in a month. I think Mark and I learned a lot by going through the process of trying to write a book in a year, which is very doable. Even more doable in theory when there's two of you writing it, except not when you're doing a podcast. That was probably the biggest mistake. Well, not mistake, but the biggest challenge we had was, we started this whole idea on episode 1. Right, we're gonna learn how the bestsellers write books, and we're going to interview them and ask them all the pertinent questions, find the formula. But when the Bryan Cranston episode went viral, the podcast just took on a life of its own, and we were really struggling because the podcast was going bananas, and at the same time we were meant to be writing this book. And there was a point where we were like, I think a few weeks or a month or so in, and we thought, we're not gonna be able to get this done in time. So it was a really interesting time. And even towards the end of the first year, the biggest problem we had was we didn't have time to market the book. Because we were finishing the book, running the podcast, doing all the interviews, dealing with everything else that we were learning for the first time running up. Because it was the first time either of us had done a podcast. I'd done a lot of radio in the past, but you just show up at the BBC studios and you'd chat as a guest and then you'd leave. It was really easy. But we started to realize that what we were actually having to do was create an hour of the equivalent of a radio program each week. And if you go back to the first few episodes, you'll hear that actually the audio that was edited, I did the first, I think, 20 episodes because I had all of the equipment. I said, I'll just edit it, thinking, it'll take, half an hour. Well, let me tell you, reveal number 1, editing the podcast takes multiple hours of however long that podcast is. And I went to an extreme where I was removing every single and it was just, it got to a point where we thought, this is insane. I couldn't edit the podcast, do the podcast, and try and keep up with writing the book and do my day job, which is still going on at that stage. So at that stage, I thought, I need some help. And it was at that point I reached out and started looking for a podcast editor. And that's when we met Dave, who's been with us from episode 20.
Well, we've got a great question from Andrew Guile here, and who says, how much of your working week does the podcast take up? And I've been thinking about this a lot. And so a week in the life of the podcast will start on a Wednesday. Okay, so we normally record on a Wednesday evening. Well, it's Wednesday morning where you are, Mr. D. I will listen back to that week's interview, which, that's stopping and starting and going back and listening things. I make notes. I check the social media that week to see if anyone's had any wins. I go on Patreon and the Academy. We look at people's wins and good news and compile that. Then you and I record in the evening, don't we? Which we block out 2 hours for that. And then once we've recorded it, we send the edit files to JD. And then a couple of days later, I get the edit from JD. We listen back, make any suggestions, and then I prepare all the copy for social media and email. I create an image, do all this ourselves or myself. Then JD confirms all the scheduling. He sends me the link. This is usually when I remember to send you next week's interview so you can listen to it ahead of the show. And Yeah, I send you notes and you listen back, you make your own notes. Then Monday is launch day. So early on a Monday morning, I launch the podcast on social media. I schedule a week's tweets. And then the rest of the week, I have interviews. I usually have 1 or 2 interviews with authors lined up during the week. These will all have been booked quite some time ago. We ask the authors to fill out a form that tells us all their essential stuff, social media, links, website, new book, author photo. I research the author. This can take a while. The publisher usually sends me a title information sheet, which tells me about the book and their bio. We might have a conversation with the publicist about a theme for the conversation. That I look for a hook. I look for something that's a bit different. And then I put together, I look at old interviews as well and find out little tidbits about the author. And then I put together sort of bullet points for conversation. I don't go into too much detail. I have bullet points that sort of steer the conversation, because I found that one of the biggest things I've learned doing these interviews is to listen. Because if you you will always just pick up something that the author says in passing. You think, oh, never thought of that. Let's pounce on that, which is great. So I am sent books by the publishers, but I rarely read them. I just haven't got the time. I couldn't read a book.
I've got something here, Mark. You talk about that sheet.
Yeah.
So this is what I got last week from HarperCollins.
Oh, right, from Linwood, yeah.
This is like it's telling you about the book. And the thing I loved about this one, Mark, on the front, it says about how it's going to be this, it talks about how many millions of copies of the books he sold in the past, but it talks about what they're going to be doing to promote the book. And on one of the things it says, we're going to be doing TV shows and billboards and podcasts. So it's even so do you see how seriously all of the majors and everyone takes podcasts now as it's one of the mainstream ways which authors do as part of the book. And we would have never have guessed that 6 years ago. It's pretty crazy. No. What are your writing dreams? Finishing that book, quitting the day job, becoming a best-selling author? Well, over 4 years, we've studied the advice of over 300 best-selling authors who've collectively sold over 500 million books. And we are excited to announce the Bestseller Academy. If you're ready to take your writing to the next level with accountability, craft, and coaching, your bestseller dreams are now only a click away. To find out more and apply, visit bestsellerexperiment.com/academy. That's bestsellerexperiment.com/academy.
But yeah, so I don't necessarily read the book. I will dip into it. I'll have a look. And we get the plug for the book out of the way. We'll give them, an opportunity to plug the book because they're doing it for free. No money exchanges hands. They get to plug their book. We get to sit and chat with them. And then, once it's all recorded, we send it off to Dave and JD. And we got a little surprise for you folks here because Dave and JD are here with us now. Welcome them to the show. Hello.
Hey, guys.
Hey, how are you guys? So introduce yourselves. Good. Which one is Dave and which is JD?
I'm Dave. Yep. Yeah, and I'm JD.
Excellent
and
stuff.
Listen to the quality. Just listen to the quality of the microphones, guys. Isn't it a beautiful thing?
I've been in a panic making sure it's just right. I got to make sure.
Yeah. You've been EQing and getting the perfect sounding voice. It's brilliant.
Yeah, normally I don't have this set up, but since being like the audio guy, I was like, I better make this thing sound good.
Do you know what was really funny before we started recording this, about 3-4 minutes before we pressed the live button, I actually just mentioned, I said, just out of interest, guys, are you recording the audio backups of yourselves? Because that's always a thing that we have to provide. And this is the other thing people don't realize, do they, folks? I mean, JD, maybe tell us about, the audio is so important, isn't it, in podcasts? I mean, I've heard so many bad examples of just terrible audio, which great content, but I just can't listen to the show because it sounds like it's recorded in a baked bean can.
Yeah. I mean, well, being an audio engineer, I'm hyper critical to the way things sound. So yeah, I mean, I think it's super important, but it's, it holds a different value to different people. I hear everything, but I also believe that the content, will carry it. You know, I will look past a noisy room or something if the content, or, you know, when dealing with like music or something, if the performance is like fantastic, oh man, like, sure, it doesn't sound the best, but they're rocking right now, you know? So I will look past that. But yeah, if something really sounds bad, I mean, I'll skip. Like the early MP3s when the compression was just terrible and it sounds all tinny and stuff like that. I'm like, I don't even want to hear that, you know? I'd rather just listen to something else.
What's your background, JD? You work as an audio engineer. What have you done in the past?
Well, I mean, I've been doing audio, music, playing in bands since high school. And so I played drums, you know, that was my original introduction to music. So I played drums in like a hardcore thrash metal band.
Oh, brilliant.
In high school. Yeah, we played Hollywood. We opened up the Billboard in Hollywood, which is now the Key Club. We were signed to Lipman Entertainment for a little bit, but it you know, I broke up the band. I was the one. I was the one. I got tired of playing the same song over and over again, because every single, you know, with music, you hear the thing that you like and you would just want to hear it. So like my drum beat for every song was like the same drum beat. And I'm like, oh gosh, I'm tired of playing this one. So I did that. Go ahead.
Gavin's asking, when's the Bestseller Experiment boy band getting together for a performance?
Well,
I mean, we were talking about
right
this
here.
just before, you know. Yeah, I've got a guitar, you've got a keyboard, drums, bass, got the whole
Dave's
thing.
got
here.
a keyboard there, yeah, absolutely. And Dave, let's talk about how we started out, because it was quite early on when you were starting to work with podcasts, because 2016 was still pretty. You know, it wasn't quite as huge as it was now in terms of the number of podcasts out there.
Yeah, I had just gotten off about 22 years at a large software company, and I was going to do something different, and had been kind of dabbling, and decided I was going to do it for real. I just looked it up. It was episode 19 with Joe Hill.
Wow.
Right.
And you were talking about hitting every little thing. It took me hours and hours to get through this first one.
Yeah.
And I eventually got overwhelmed, and, you know, after a couple of years of that, and had to find JD, which is lifesaver for me, to just, because I was doing more and more and more content. But yes, I had started out just sort of like, it's kind of an interesting hobby where me and my brother were kind of goofing around with it. And I decided I wanted to make a real deal about it. And before I knew it, I had 5 and 6 and 7 different shows running at the same time. And I'm now more scheduling different shows at different times. And I haven't edited this show in, I don't know, a couple of years probably at this point.
Although a lot of people, if you listened very carefully to Dave's voice, you might recognize it, because one day we decided that we were going to do these episodes called deep dives, because we wanted to, offer people this kind of, extra content, bonus content in support, return for them supporting the podcast, to pay for the running costs and the like. And Dave, you became part of the show, didn't you? Because your voice comes on at the beginning of the deep dive preview.
You thought it'd be really unique to have an American voice in there somewhere. So
absolutely, and it sounds great. It sounds great.
I will say too, in digging around for this show, I found a whole folder full of outtakes. So this is really the main reason I did any of this is just outtakes. I got tons of them. So. If anybody wants to hear them, go ahead and just send me a message. I take all sorts of Bitcoin or whatever it takes. So.
Oh yeah, I'm sure there's a lot on there that you didn't hear, because one of my favorite things that you ever both did was there was a period of time where I think almost every episode there was some outtake at the end, and you'd think the show had finished, and then suddenly, and there were some absolute howlers. And I think we even had a compilation, didn't we, for one of the Christmas shows, if I think back a few years, which we should dig out, because it was. We should do that again for Christmas.
I will just say here, one's called Constipation, I Know. Another one's called Cow, Brilliant. Another one is called Baked Beans, and the list goes on. So there's tons of content. We could probably start a whole nother show just on BXP outtakes, I think.
I'm dreading this. I can't remember any of this God only knows what I've been waffling on about.
Well, this is the thing, is a lot of people, obviously this is live. Everything we're doing here is going on the show pretty much. But when we pre-record episodes a few days before, there have been times when Mark and I have like got the giggles, or we just started laughing so hard that we literally had to stop. And we have this thing where we clap, and this is a thing that audio people know about, is that we clap and it creates a spike in the audio, which means that JD and Dave can both see that, okay, something's happened at this point, and they go in and check it out. And then we clap again to start once we've composed ourselves. But there's, you guys make us sound a lot better than we really are in reality. It's quite amazing. I worked out, in answer to that earlier question, we estimate that when you add everyone's time together, whether it's, Mark researching the interview, doing the interviews, me writing notes, sometimes doing the interviews, you guys editing it, creating the web pages, backing up files, all the boring stuff that we have to talk about on email all the time. We reckon that it's about 25 hours of man hours that go into each individual episode, which is quite bonkers when you think about, when you're listening to the show and it's like an hour show and it sounds as it does. There's been almost a full day, over a full day's work of people's individuals' time just to get everything ready to put it out.
Gavin's got a question here. How do you have any time left to do your own writing? Well, I do it first thing. So I write 7:30 to 9:30 on a project. If I get extra time, then I'll use that time. But yeah, I tend to write first thing. Then there's usually an interview in the morning, either on one of the days, and then there'll be something to edit, something to listen back to, something to research. There's a little bit every day. So it's doable. And this is all I do. I write and do podcasts, so I'm very lucky in that respect as well. But
it's no different from people like Michael Connolly that is working on, sitting in the room writing the Bosch script for Amazon Prime whilst he's trying to write his current novel, and he's doing interviews. So any successful author has to get to a place where they learn how to be super focused and organized. And that's one of the reasons why I'm so fascinated by productivity and habits and all those things, because I think you need that when an author gets to a certain point. It only gets busier the more successful you get in many ways. But a question for JD and Dave I want to ask quickly. For people who are listening that are thinking of maybe starting their own podcast, what kind of one tip would you give them as the guys in the background creating all the magic? What would you give them? Because you work with lots of different podcasts. What would you say would be the most important thing for them to know? So maybe start with you, Dave, first.
I would say, to kind of jump on JD's point, if the audio isn't perfect, we all want perfect audio. It really is content can kind of pace over all of the inconsistencies. Obviously, you want to get as consistent of a sound as you possibly can, but think about what you will talk about, right? You're likely not going to make $1 million creating a podcast, but as you two marks have shown, it is a great way to engage the people, your audience, right? And to get feedback and this interaction instead of it being a one-way thing. You get to communicate the things that you're trying to write about or the ideas you're thinking about. And you're also able to kind of interject the way you see things into going on to other people's shows or the guests that you have. So it's really to have a good sense of what it is that you want to talk about before you start talking, I think, is pretty important.
Yeah.
How about you, JD?
I totally agree. It's just like your podcast. You guys' relationship and the way you communicate with each other is fantastic, and it's honest. So I would just say, be honest, just be yourself and just put that out there. Say what you want to say. And instead of trying to make a scripted show and overproduce it, you don't really need that. But in terms of getting yourself set up, you could probably get just a cheap microphone, just something set above your your webcam. My webcam mic is pretty good, so just get yourself set up and try not to be in an empty room with bare walls, and put some couches or something in there, and that'll get you over 50% of the way there. So If you wanted some like action items to try and do, but other than that, just do it and find out.
It is the editing that's the killer, though, I think, because I speak to people who don't have a Dave or JD, and it's that's the thing that takes up a lot of the time. And I watch. I don't know if anyone's been watching Only Murders in the Building, and it's on Disney Plus over. I think it's Hulu in the States, and they're recording a podcast. I'm like, where are they editing this podcast? Where does the edit? You never see them edit anything. You know, the Tina Fey character has a team who does it for her. But yeah, it's yeah. So yeah,
when we set up new clients, you were talking about 25 man hours per episode or something like that. We sort of like just ballpark with new clients. Like we're going to spend at least 3x whatever we record, just in the edit part. We're going to spend at least 3 times that to get your edit done. So the episode, and then you throw on all of the coordination between hosts and guests, and backing up and stuff like that. You can get to a point down the road where you kind of got a rhythm, and that 3x can get a little tighter and quite a bit shorter. But you should plan for at least that when you're doing just the editing part, just to get a final show. And then if you want to manage more than one episode at a time, it's good to have a couple people kind of tracking the progress. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Brilliant stuff. Well, thank you so much, guys, for appearing. We may bring you back on later on if there's any techie questions that people ask, but this is brilliant.
I do have one question. We've got a question from Tracy Montague, which came before the show. How much of what is recorded is kept and how much is cut? We don't, JD, we're fairly clean, aren't we? There's not a lot of fat, is there?
It depends. It depends. But with your episode, I mean, I basically just trim the ends where the show hasn't started, and like after you guys say your goodbye. Other than that, it all gets stuck. It's all in there. But back when I was cleaning up the ums, that could actually like all the little ums and pregnant pauses and all that stuff, they can add up to like 20%, if you really want to go in there and get every single one, but it just depends on the person who's speaking.
Yeah. Do we have any vocal tics that drive you nuts? Because I was listening to a podcast today, and the content was great, but they used the word like a comma. So like we're talking like about society and like this is my podcast and I was like, oh my God, if there was some sort of, piece of software that could take it all out, it would be about 20 minutes shorter. So do we have any vocal tics that drive you nuts?
You guys don't.
You
guys don't.
Bless
it's a good job we didn't say it. Because then everyone will be hearing it.
Yeah. But yeah, just like you said, different people have different ways that they talk. Some people will say repeatedly, and it's I take them all out, if I can. But you guys, you're pretty solid,
Here's a tip for anyone thinking of doing a podcast. It's a bit of a left field one, but if you're thinking of doing a podcast, go and spend a few months at your local Toastmaster club. Because I did Toastmasters for about 6 years, even actually during the beginning of the podcast, I was still doing it. And they do a thing each week where someone is assigned as the and R counter. I'm not kidding you. This is for real. They have a person with a clipboard, and anyone in the room, including the Toastmaster who's up there running the whole meeting, they mark off every time. And then there's a report at the end of each meeting where they run through everyone and say, right, John, you got 2 ums, 3 Rs and 4 lip smacks. And then they just literally go through every single person. And the weird thing is that once you become aware of the fact that we all do it, I mean, even on, BBC News, you listen to some of the biggest presenters, out on the planet, they and R, and we have all of these tics. But the minute you become aware of it, you can start to slowly eradicate it from. Now, I'm speaking really carefully here because I'm so conscious now of not using an But I cringe when I listen back to some of our episodes, and it's when you listen back, I think, oh my gosh, I do and R still, and I thought I'd got rid of that. But
JD says, be yourself, and I'm a lot more sweary at home than I am on the show, because that was a decision we took very early on. I think it was a Sarah Pinborough episode.
It was, but it was also the email from a lady that broke my heart, where she said to us, it was just before the Sarah Pinborough episode aired, and we got this lovely email from a mum saying, I love your podcast. It's one of the best things. And what the greatest thing now, Mark and I just had this discussion about, do we drop the C word bomb, which was in the episode originally? And this email from this mum said, and my favorite thing to do is on my way to drop off my 8-year-old son to school, we listen to the episodes together. Literally, this was like 2 days before we're thinking, do we put an explicit rate? And that kind of changed the course, didn't it, Mark? We want to keep it family friendly as best we can.
Yeah, we had a full and frank conversation about it, if you recall. It was quite,
it was quite difficult because it was partly linked to our book as well.
Yeah, I mean, but when I listened back to that one with us and Sarah, we were like naughty little schoolboys egging her on, sort of giggling, going, oh, swear again, go on. And it's, so it's, if anything, this podcast has made me less sweary than I was 6 years ago, which is a miracle. So, it was, but I think it was the right decision to do because I think it just makes it a little more cooled down, a little more relaxed. And, we're not trying to be clever. We're just, having a nice, polite adult conversation, so yeah. But
I think it's actually almost unusual now to get a podcast without swearing. In Canada, we have many vehicles driving around with some real bad stickers. I'm like, there are kids that can read, like 5 years old, and they're like, Mummy, what's that mean? And so for me, the reason why it was such a big deal for me is when we started the podcast, my main reason for wanting to create it, not knowing whether it would even get an audience, was my daughter was becoming fascinated in writing. And she was about 13 at the time, 13, 14, and she was writing every day and she was really wanting to become an author. And I thought, if anything comes from this, I'll create a little archive of really cool little shows for her to listen to, maybe when she's an adult. And so I was always thinking, if I'm sitting there swearing like a trooper, my daughter's going to be like, God, Dad, you foul mouth, So that was my take on it. But
but you wait. Mine are 20 and 22. And swear more than I do. So, there's you just trying to hold back the tide, man, so anyway, but that's
brilliant stuff.
That's us, brilliant. Cool.
So anyway, JD and Dave, firstly, we just want to thank you publicly for all the work. We do mention it at the end of lots of shows, but you guys, I want everyone to acknowledge these guys here because, without Dave and JD, running things and keeping the ship sailing, this podcast would absolutely not happen. So we really thank you from the bottom of our hearts for all of the work that you do, all the things you have to put up with us, and just for being two great, amazing guys and being part of this team and for hopefully, helping change lives, through all the incredible work you do. So thank you both. And thank you for joining us today as well.
And congratulations. We'll see you on the live show in 6 years.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. 6 years. So, hey, thanks to Dave and JD. Thank you, guys. Thank you so much, guys. Amazing. Thank you so much.
See you. Thanks.
Take care, guys. Brilliant stuff. That's brilliant. That was a first. I don't think we were actually saying before we started the show, that was the first time that we've ever had the four
I've never
of us.
spoken to JD before. Yeah. It's the first time I spoke to JD. Yeah. I've seen his face and we message each other almost every day. But we've never had a conversation. It's brilliant. Yeah, It's fantastic. They're brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. So shall I do social media and wins?
Yes, absolutely. Let's dive in because, there's so much going on and I've seen someone else has just entered the room who's had a win
entered
this
our
week.
green room. Well, let's bring on because we were normally at the end of the show we do social media, we talk about people's wins, but we thought this was too good to pass up. So I'm going to bring Aaron Brooks onto the show. Aaron, how are you today, sir? Welcome.
I'm doing good, buddy. Good to see you.
Surprise! You didn't know this was happening, did you?
I flatter. First of all, happy birthday to you guys. 6 years old. That's a big day. Big day for you guys. Yeah. So happy.
Almost out of diapers. Almost.
So Aaron. So you're a member of the Academy. How did you find us? Did you find us via the podcast? How did you discover us?
Yeah, exactly. It was the podcast. I it came up in the recommendations on the Apple podcast because I started listening to writing stuff. I think the first one it started with writing excuses, Brandon Sanderson thing, right. And then I think maybe Joanna Penn, and then this one popped up next to that. And so that led to just discovering you guys and your cheerful, positive voices. I was like, well, I'm going to be listening to this podcast for every time. I was hooked. Yeah.
So Aaron, tell us your news.
Well, there's this, it started as like a script pipeline, which was for like Hollywood for scripts and competition. And they started a book part of that called Book Pipeline. And my manuscript won the winner of the sci-fi fantasy category, which
amazing.
Which means that you win a little bit of money, which is great. But the best part is being part of that community. And Orbit Books, Priyanka at Orbit Books has 2 weeks exclusive, like first look at it. So they're gonna, kind of like bumps you up, gets you at the head of the long line. So that's. So I'm going over the manuscript feverishly today, and we'll send it to this guy Peter at Book Pipeline, and then he'll send it off to Priyanka, and then 2 weeks. So I think we're going to find out like pretty quickly, like if it's a yes or if it's a no. So.
My gosh. So this has literally just happened. You broke this news yesterday, I think, on the BXP team group to say, wow.
I found out on Friday, and I immediately messaged Mark, because he's read a bunch of my stuff, and so I just, and then I just broke. So,
well, firstly, we want to just say massive congratulations, Aaron, because firstly, this is a first for us. This is the first time we've done a live win on the podcast on video. Yeah. So this is thank you for coming on. Literally, we asked Aaron. Right, we asked Aaron about a couple of minutes before we went live. So this is how. Yeah,
it's like, should we get Aaron on?
This is how it rolls.
Yeah, I'll email him.
So
I was just running to pick up my son because he had a tummy ache at school. I went there. I said, "Okay, you can come back and hang out at home then." And he said, "No, that's boring. I'll stay."
That's amazing. So massive congratulations, because this is such a huge win. I mean, this is a major competition. What was the name of your entry?
It's called Nocturnal Ink. It's it's a supernatural thriller with a tattoo twist on vampires.
Wow. So what we're going to do, Aaron, is we're going to follow this. We're going to follow this story. I love the fact that this major publisher has got 2 weeks with your book. It's because publishers can take as long as they want, right? But when you've got 2 weeks, there's going to be they're going to have to read it, and if they love it, then something might happen. So we'll continue this story and follow your career. But a lot of what you've explained today is the dream that Mark and I have had, like to help people get to this place where they get some major success that takes them up, gives them that belief, like your stuff is amazing. And then see where that goes. But we also want to say live on air as well, you're one of the hardest working individuals that we know, and you deserve every success that you get. So Mark and I are just absolutely delighted. No, it's true, man. You just gotta take it. You gotta take it. But this is what it's about. We are so thrilled for you. And I always say this, but you're inspiring everyone else out there who's thinking, well, maybe I should enter a writing competition. Maybe it might happen.
Absolutely, you should take. Every manuscript, every script you write is a lottery ticket. The odds are you're not going to win, but if you keep playing, you just might. And you just keep getting that, and just be real with yourself about criticism, and take harsh criticism. Look for the people that give you harsh criticism, but also that read your genre.
Absolutely.
Brilliant. I've got shelves over there that are now 2 deep, full of books from listeners of the podcast. Mike Shackle. We've got J.M. Card there. We've got S.E. Gowland. We've got Andrew Chapman. We've got Pernilla Hughes. Paul Arduin. I mean, I'm going to make some room for yours there, Aaron. So hopefully we'll see that on there soon. But yeah, everyone who's listening to this, I got shelves to fill, so get writing.
Absolutely. Brilliant. Aaron, all the best. We wish you all the best, and obviously hope to connect with you again. We'll see you in the Academy next week, but we hope to connect with you soon on the podcast, maybe about this story, and see where it goes.
You too, man. Love you.
Thanks so much, Aaron.
Thank you so much. Thanks for coming on. Wow.
That was a first.
I know. A live win. I didn't even know you'd got hold of him in time. That's amazing.
I was little emails bouncing back and forth while we were doing the show. So yeah, that was cool.
Brilliant.
That was absolutely cool. I got a couple of other social media ones as well. So one of them, Inkborn Blade, who I think might be still watching. Inkborn Blade said, yesterday marked my 250th consecutive day of the 200 words a day challenge. In that time, I put the finishing touches to one novel, written another start to finish, written 2 short stories and edited another 3, done a handful of book reviews and started on my next project, which is just amazing. And Inkborn says, huge thanks to the bestseller experiment for teaching me that you don't have to churn out thousands of words in a day. In these 250 days, I've written just over 114,000 words. That's more than I've ever done, but it only comes out to an average of 457 words a day. Little and often is what works for me.
Brilliant. Such a brilliant story. And it just, the more of these we get, I mean, we keep banging on about the 200 word challenge and saying to people, you have to try this. This is something, it doesn't start overnight. You don't get the writing habit from day one. But if you have the focus of that aim of at least 200 words a day, it makes such a difference. So congratulations. And you're with us. I just noticed that you popped a hello on there. So congratulations. 250 is phenomenal. Is phenomenal. You're going to get that year, that 365, which I know a lot of people have achieved.
I've just seen something. Look, JD is with his dog Alfie. Let's. How do we get this? How do?
If anyone's watching this on YouTube, you're going to see this kind of love in with JD. And what's your dog's name, JD?
Alfie.
Alfie. Look at Alfie. He's just like hands on your shoulder.
He wanted some attention, so
brilliant. Our first ever dog on the podcast. Fantastic.
Yeah, we've been desperate to get people's pets on.
Yeah.
What breed is Alfie?
He's a Spinoni Italiano, which is
beautiful.
Just a giant. He's giant. I don't know if you can see how big his paws are, but like,
oh my gosh,
he's a big
he's taller than you, JD. When you're sitting down, that's amazing.
He scratched me on the back of my neck while I was standing up. I'm tall. I'm a pretty tall guy. So
this is absolutely a podcaster first. Brilliant stuff. Love it.
Just beautiful.
We've also had another person who's come on, Moon Bunny Creative, who said, I did 200 words a day for 390 days, thanks to BXP. But I've moved from that to the Ben Aronovich method. Some days are 0 words, some days are 10, and some days are 2,000. So that's brilliant. 390 consecutive days. Amazing. Absolutely phenomenal.
Brilliant. I think we're done. I think we should wrap this up, don't you, Mr. D?
I think so, absolutely.
Yeah.
So thank you to everyone, firstly, for listening to this podcast. We say this a lot, but we mean this from the bottom of our hearts. It would be a really weird show if it was just me and Mark chatting to each other each week. So we are so grateful for everyone that shows up to these live shows, that listens to us every week, that tells their friends about the podcast, that takes some of the ideas on that we hear from our authors that we put out there. And it's time. Mr. Stay has got, like, I can't even believe this is happening, a mini Colin the Caterpillar. I didn't even know he existed.
Yeah, a mini Colin the Caterpillar cake, which for those listening on audio is about the size of a Jack Russell's poo-poo. And probably has the same texture as well. And I'm on a calorie controlled diet. I've lost 25 pounds since March, but I've banked the calories for this.
Is this your treat for October, Mark?
This is I did 5K on the exercise bike and lots of walking today. So yeah, it's
just about to offset that.
Exactly. One bite. It's a bebe, Colin.
I love it. This is great. What a genius idea. My goodness.
I'm going to start with a face.
You have to tell me what it tastes like, Mark. What is in the inside? I've never actually, it's like a spongy, let's have a look on the inside. Yeah, it's like sponge. Very nice. I get that in Canada.
They put Colin the Caterpillar in a jar. They basically squished him into a jar, and I got one as an experiment, and it's the most disgusting thing I've ever tasted. It was horrible. But this is nice. Yeah,
just to prove that we're not actually sponsored by M&S.
Yeah, no, the jar thing, big mistake. But this was this is nice.
See, maybe what people could do is they could have a mini Colin the Caterpillar cake for each either chapter or act that they finish, and then the big cake when they finish. I think that's doable, Mark, isn't it? It's absolutely brilliant.
Sorry, I'm eating. Sorry. Which is nice.
So and just to finish off as well, thank you to everyone who sent us stories as well. Stories about your progress as a writer, your breakthroughs, your challenges. We've read some heartbreaking stories, but often they end in triumph. So we want to encourage people as well. This is our lifeblood. Like, keep on sending those stories. Your journey, it's really important to us. It really fires up this, and if you've got a great story to tell, you will inspire other people. So thank you so much to everyone who's taken time out to drop us an email. We have probably had, Mark, over the years, I'm trying to think, it's hundreds, if not, it might even be thousands when you take into account all the tweets and other things that we've had. So many phenomenal stories, and they're just getting better, aren't they? Every day they're getting better and better.
Yeah, and they are getting better and bigger, and it's you go back and listen to those early episodes. I'm quite Captain Cynical, but you've almost won me over, Mr. D. I'm almost a big softie now. But yeah, I've become a better writer because of this podcast, no question whatsoever. Just from talking to authors, talking to our listeners, the groups that we've got, the communities that we've got on Facebook and in the Academy and online. They're such a lovely bunch of people. I've been lucky to meet some of them in person, or we've had Zoom conversations or whatever. But it's been absolutely brilliant. It's been
brilliant. And one thing I will say, after 6 years of doing this podcast, we've had our moments, haven't we? When we were writing the book, lots of pressure, lots of big decisions we had to make. We got to a point. I've obviously been through a bit of a crazy journey myself, in terms of family and but there was a point where we were on the edge, I would say. After about 3 years, was it? We were pretty serious about saying we were done, and we were ready. We thought we'd done everything we could, but you know what kept us going? What kept us going were the emails that people started sending us. And so I am now in a place where I really look forward to this. I would say to anyone, the number one thing from my perspective, if you're thinking of starting a podcast, you've got to do something that you're fascinated in, something that you love, and something that fills you up. Because the one thing I know for certain, Mark, is when we get together and we do our chat, whatever we don't know what's often going to come out. I always feel lifted when I finish recording. It's always, I always leave on a high, and it's such a wonderful part of our weeks, I think, now. And so for anyone who's thinking of doing their podcast, that's the one that, apart from all the amazing feedback that you get from listeners and all the love that you hear and feel from everyone, it's brilliant. But if you pick something that you're passionate about, something that you're fascinated in, something that makes you smile, makes you laugh, and if you do it with someone else, I think I would recommend that. Like, doing a podcast by yourself is really hard. But Mark and I, we just enjoy chatting with each other. So if you're thinking of doing a podcast, find someone to do it with, because it makes it 3 times as much fun. And do something that you really love. And that's the test for me. If I come off the end of the podcast and I feel lifted, and it's been a highlight of my week to record with you, Mark. So thank you, Mr. Stay, for doing all of these crazy things that we do, and for us to still be here after 6 years. That in itself is amazing. Absolutely brilliant. So
back at you, mate. It's been fun. It's been really, really good fun. And I'm very glad we stayed the course, and I've no intention of quitting yet.
Absolutely. So we hope, this is what we hope in the future. We hope that over time, more and more guests on the podcast will be listeners of the podcast who have broken through, have found that for me, if you can imagine in a few years from now, we're almost just interviewing people who are big name, best-selling authors, but they did it alongside us, and then we can talk about their journey. That would be phenomenal to be able to do. So that's kind of my vision I'm throwing out there.
Now, Susie Edge is teasing us. Time for me to make a public declaration. I think a live public declaration would be quite a thing. Come on, Susie, are you going to do this or not? Because otherwise we'll have to edit this out, and that makes JD's life more difficult. And I'm going away for the weekend, so he has to do this toot sweet. So I need to edit this tomorrow. So come on, Susie, you're going to do it.
What Susie's planning on telling us, if she's going to tell us what her public declaration is, because we do love a public declaration. Let's tell people how they can find out about the podcast and stay in touch, Mark.
Yes, we're on the internet, bestsellerexperiment.com. Find us there. Facebook and is Bestseller Experiment. How many times have I done this and I can't get it right? Twitter and Instagram is at bestsellerxp, apparently. And if you want to drop us a line, go to bestsellerexperiment.com. There's a contact button there. And if you want to support the podcast, bestsellerexperiment.com/support. That gets you access to deep dives and all sorts of amazing stuff as well. So, yeah, do it.
That's it. And if you'd like to get our weekly newsletter, pop along to bestsellerexperiment.com and click on the newsletter link to get an update of every single episode we do and what you will learn from it. And obviously, we have to mention the 200-word challenge. If you want to join us in the free daily challenge to write a minimum of 200 words a day, it's 200wordchallenge.com. And finally, if you're thinking about going deeper with Mark and I, you'd like to have us as your coaches to help you through your journey, to get accountability, coaching and community, it's the Bestseller Academy. That's the place to join, academy.bestsellerexperiment.com. Pop over and see us. And we have a live dream declaration, another first. Go for it, Mark.
So Susie Edge says, okay, by 14th of December, her birthday, I will have my novel with my agent. I've been faffing with a first draft. Time to get it out there.
Dun, dun,
Go,
dun.
Susie. That is going to go in the diary. What happens is I put it in the diary about a week before. You get a message from me saying, how's it going? And very often the answer is, oh my God, you actually put it in the diary. And I'm like, yeah. Oh, yeah. These go in the diary.
Brilliant.
Yeah. So,
and this is what I love. So many people
Susie.
encouraging Susie, Robin, Mark, Steve, Moon Bunny, Andrew, all encouraging. There is no way that Susie is going to miss that deadline now. So we're all cheering you on, Susie, and let us know how you get on. Brilliant stuff. Well, Mr. Stay, I think we've come to the end of this live show. Thank you all to everyone that's turned up to be with us, whether it's morning, noon, or night for you, wherever you are in the world. And again, thank you to everyone for listening to this podcast. We love you all, and we can't wait to be with you again next week. So, Mr. Stay, goodbye, sir. Great 6 years. Here's to another one. And it's a goodbye from Mark 1.
Many goodbye from Mark 2. No.
Goodbye.
Bye.